Okay, we're ready to start the game. The game starts at 8 o'clock on July 1st, with Devon and Gamble being placed anywhere within 15 hexes of the Gettysburg town square. And on the Confederate side, the division of Heath will be arriving on the Chambersburg Pike. There we have Devon and Gamble as I've deployed them 15 hexes from the Gettysburg town square. And way over here on the right, we have the brigades of Meredith and Cutler arriving on the Emmetsburg Road. Now, as in the original game, the Union moves first. So Devon and Gamble, if they wanted to, they could actually go as far down the road as here, blocking the entry of Heath's division. But that would just mean that Heath's division will come on in the nearest square near Devon and Gamble. I don't think they want that. But they want to gain every inch of space they can. So I'm going to have Devon and Gamble move forward, and then I'll move the Confederates. So what I'll try to do is shoot video after I've moved both sides, and if there's combat, I'll have a special section of the video for that. So let's pick up the video after I've moved Devon and Gamble and Heath's division. Okay, this is the situation at 8 o'clock after Devon and Gamble have moved up, and Heath has moved his 4 brigades. Now, I'm using dismounted markers from Battle Hymn to show that Gamble and Devon are dismounted. Now, the reason I have them go so close is because I want them to interdict the Chambersburg Pike so that Heath is forced to deploy his brigades kind of in line. You may remember that the column rules in this game are very, very liberal. And you'll see that in a moment when I show you the positions of Meredith and Cutler. Okay, there's Meredith and Cutler down near the Peach Orchard, Wheatfield area. As you can see, they really scoot when you're doing strategic movement. You're not within 5 hexes of the enemy and on a road. You can go up to 20 hexes. It's about 1/4 movement point per hex. So that's the situation after both sides have moved 8 o'clock. Now, because this situation is a little unusual, I'm actually going to show the Union troops before they move for the 9 o'clock turn. Here we have Reynolds, several brigades of the 1st Corps coming on the Emmetsburg Road. Meredith and Cutler will continue their march up the Emmetsburg Road. But we have this unusual situation where this brigade came in on this very obscure road called the Nunemaker Hill Road. Now, Rowley, if you check most of the standard histories, you'll find out that this brigade did march from Emmetsburg. Quite true. But it made a wrong turn, and in the immediate vicinity of Gettysburg, it actually came in to the battlefield on this road, which a lot of games get wrong. And fortunately, Gettysburg 77 got it right, and that is where this unit came in. He actually marched up these back roads here, and actually came in on the Hanover Road. So I wanted to show that. So we'll catch the action again after I've moved for 9 o'clock. Okay, these are the positions after both sides have moved for 9 o'clock. Now, you may have noticed that Gamble and Devon have not fallen back very far. This is because these brigades are still operating under concentration orders, a little system I made up for the game to prevent the Confederates from getting overzealous. Because in real life, the Confederates did not know what was in front of them. So until Hill's corps counter comes on, the Confederates are still operating under these concentration or defensive orders, which means, in game terms, they can't enter zones of control. Of course, the Union player knows that, but he's got to be careful not to get surrounded. So he's falling back, trying to gain for the Union precious time. Over on the other fronts, you can see Rowley's brigade has now reached the Hanover Road and is now influencing the Confederate right flank and Devon and Gamble's left flank. Meredith and Cutler are just approaching the town now. Reynolds, being a leader, can scoot up that road, going a whopping 32 hexes per turn. And of course we have the rest of the Corps coming up from behind. So that's the situation after 9 o'clock. Okay, these are the positions after both sides have moved for 10 o'clock. Now, Devon and Gamble fell back a little bit more. Heath's division of these 4 brigades still cannot enter enemy zones of control because they're still under defensive orders. But Pender's division has come up with 2 battalions of artillery, McIntosh and Pegram. And something has changed, an important change, because A.P. Hill is now on the field, and he's a corps commander, and he will be able to give attack orders next turns if he rolls successfully on the die. So we have a changed situation, definitely. Meredith and Cutler have come up, and Reynolds is over here at the Lutheran Theological Seminary. As long as the 1st Corps units are within 10 of Reynolds, they're fine. And of course we still have the other brigades of the 1st Corps just now approaching the town of Gettysburg. So we may have combat, depending on what the initiative roll is next turn, for A.P. Hill. And the game is going historically in the sense that this is where the actual fight occurred around the McPherson's farm here at about 10 a.m. So with the tweaked arrival times, we've got more or less the historical situation here, which is really what I like about simulation games on Gettysburg. I like the historical situation, and you can vary it with your strategy. But if the order of appearance is not correct, really nothing is correct. So with that, let's go on to the 11 a.m. turn. Okay, picking up the video here, a little bit of a difference. After the Union have moved for the 11 o'clock turn, but before the Confederates have moved, because I've rolled the die for Hill's initiative, and he got a 5, which means his corps has attack orders, which means they can enter zones of control and there could be combat. Over here on the Union right flank here, elements of the 11th Corps are coming up under Howard from Emmitsburg, and elements of the 11th Corps are coming up the Taneytown Road. Howard's corps was actually split. They took 2 different roads to get to Gettysburg. So we'll follow the action then after I've moved the Confederates, but before there's any combat. Should point out too that I've made up these little wee move markers because I've made a modification to the game in the sense that any artillery unit that is moved cannot fire. It takes a while to establish artillery positions, and so that's why those move markers are there. So let's catch the action after I've moved the Confederates. Okay, this is the situation after the Confederates have moved, and we have now our first attacks. Now I am using the facing rules that the original game had. Also, what I call that magnet rule, where units are pulled into battle. Just as an example, for those of you who are familiar with the original game, you can't maneuver around an enemy brigade. You just can't go wherever the hell you want. The minute you get within 2 hexes of an enemy brigade, if you're going to close for battle, you have to close right away. You can't maneuver around and get in his rear if you're within 2. I kind of like that rule. And this is what they still call a one-direction attack. Had I been able to get another unit in here, I would have been I could have had a 2-direction attack against Devon, but I would have had to soak off to Meredith. So this battle isn't the best odds. This one isn't bad, but they're not excellent. Overall, we've got an 8-6. Why 6? Well, Devon is doubled. Cavalry, Union Cavalry, Devon and Gamble are doubled because they've got Spencer carbines and stuff. So it's a 1-to-1, but Devon is on higher ground. So it's a 1-to-1, adding 1 to the dice. So that's not the best attack, but I felt the Confederates should take the initiative. We've also got 6 here against 3, so we have a 2-to-1 attack against Rowley, but Pettigrew is attacking across Willoughby Run, which is another adding 1. So 2-to-1 add 1, and 1-to-1 add 1. 2 attacks. Let's roll the die and see what happens. I should mention that I've modified the original table, trying to keep it as close to the original as possible. That's the original table. But I've tweaked it and added some route results in there. It's very familiar. For those of you who are familiar with the original game, the table is very similar, but it's got a few extra results like D route. So let's do these attacks by Pettigrew, Davis, and Archer. See what happens. Okay, in the Pettigrew versus Rowley battle, the result was an exchange and an AR. So I've made these double-sided counters. You now flip them, and I've got a little wee black triangle to show that it's on its reduced side. And same for Pettigrew. And the Confederates got an AR result, which means they have to go back 1 or 2 squares. I'll choose to have Pettigrew go back 2. Now, the way I've tweaked the game is anytime you take losses, you have to check for morale. So we have to do morale check for Pettigrew and rally. Now the base morale for all infantry is 4. So if I roll a 5 or 6 on rally, he routs. Same goes for Pettigrew, except Pettigrew, as you'll notice, has got a +1. So his morale is actually 5. So let's roll for Pettigrew's morale, which is a 4. So he's fine, he doesn't rout. We'll now roll for rally, and he rolls a 3, so he's fine. So that's the end of the engagement between Pettigrew and rally. Let's see how the Davis, Archer, and Devon attack goes through. This one is not as good. Well, the Confederates were lucky in that attack. They rolled a 1, so the result was exchange plus DR. So Devon has to be flipped, and you might as well take the loss off the smaller brigade. So Archer will flip, and it was a DR result, which means the defender has to retreat 1 or 2 squares. So Devon will go back to here, still in dismounted status, and you can occupy if the defender vacates the square. So I'll have Davis occupy the square. Now I've tweaked the rule again in that any units in the attack, because there's been losses, they have to check for morale. So I'll go for Archer first. Archer rolls a 4, he's fine. And Davis, it'd be awful embarrassing if he routed. And he does. Okay, well, he does rout, and that means he goes 4 squares back. Now, I don't have any little route markers right now, but I'm going to use these little red markers for now. So when you rout, you go 4 squares back. 1, 2, 3, 4. Davis is routed. Makes sense. Davis, by the way, was the nephew of President Jeff Davis. And I believe that brigade was largely a green brigade. It wasn't the best. So, that's the situation after the 11 o'clock turn. The Union has managed to repulse a brigade of the Confederates here, routing them, and repulsing Pettigrew too, so they've actually held their ground pretty well. So we can now go on to the 12 noon turn. Okay, this is the situation at noon after the Union have moved and the Confederates have moved. Hill rolled a 5, which means he has attack orders, so his brigades can go in. A couple of things. Davis here, my rule is that the route markers come off after you have moved if you're within 10 of your corps commander, which of course Davis is. So when you route, you're virtually out of the game for 1 turn. You have to rally, though it is automatic rally if you're within 10. But we've got an interesting situation here. This time the artillery did not move, so we've got some heavy artillery long-range support. And I've got rules for adjacent combat up to about 8 hexes. But I'll do those battles and we'll see how that turns out. We have a 2-direction attack here against Merida because he's been hit by 3 brigades and he will have artillery support. So I'll work out the odds, roll the die, and we'll pick up the action after the attacks have gone through. Okay, we had some interesting combats here. Archer, Brockenborough, and Lane were able to get a 3-to-1 attack on Meredith because they were able to use this long-range artillery. It certainly helped. Meredith did break. He needed a 6 to break, and that's what he rolled. So he routed and went 4 squares back. Over here, the brigades of Thomas and Perrin attacked Cutler up on this ridge at McPherson's. It was an iffy attack, but they got an exchange. So Thomas's brigade took the hit, and unfortunately he routed. Perrin and Cutler both checked morale, and they were fine. So that's the situation at 12 noon. The Confederates are just on top of McPherson's ridge now, and the Union may have to fall back. But Howard's brigades are up now at Cemetery Hill, and Smith and Coster are trailing down the Tawnytown Road. So we've got an interesting situation here. And let's go on to the 1 o'clock turn. Okay, this is the situation after both sides have moved for the 1 o'clock turn. Now, Hill this time rolled a 3, which meant he had defensive orders, which means he couldn't close on those Union positions. Not that he'd want to, he wasn't quite ready yet. A new situation though, because Richard Ewell has arrived on the field, over here, Corps Commander, and Rhodes' division, who is now outflanking the Union 1st Corps and now facing the 11th under Howard. Reynolds, by the way, when he rolled, he got a cautious, he rolled a 1, which meant he had to withdraw, but he was going to withdraw anyway, so he withdrew to this line here, and the Union line is looking pretty good. We also have Smith and Coster's brigades coming up near Cemetery Hill. So the Union line is very stable. And like I said, it's the 1 o'clock turn. And casualties, well, let me just take a look at them and I'll give you the point score as to casualties. Okay, as per the original rules, I haven't changed those. You get 1 point for each shattered or flipped unit. And as it turns out, the Confederates have 3 damaged units, and the Union has 3 damaged units. So technically the Union is doing very well. Nothing has collapsed yet. They're inflicting as good as they get. So I'm very pleased with the game, the way it's working. Certainly the historical times being tweaked is giving us very realistic results for the battle. This is very much how the battle went in real life. So I'm very pleased with that. So it's the 1 p.m. turn, and I think I'll end this part of the video at that time. If I continue with the video, we'll pick up the action at 1 o'clock, see what happens. So that's the end of part 2 of the video. Thank you for watching.